Warning: the following broadcast is not approved by your teacher, university, politician, or government. Side effects may include skepticism, better reasoning skills, liberty, peace, and an escape from the woke.
What's up, everybody? My name is LP Muniz, and welcome to a live recording in Twitter Spaces. Thanks to anybody who's listening to the replay, and hey, if somebody pops in live, that's pretty cool too. This is, I'm going to try and start doing these on a regular basis, like literally daily, to the extent that I can. We're going to take some news headlines, we're going to talk about them. If there's ever anything you want to talk about, you can send me a request into the show, or you can always join the space and we can have a conversation live. It doesn't have to be about the news, it can be about really anything, but we're going to use the news of the day to as a jumping off point. Something I learned today, apparently Twitter Spaces has now incorporated video into it, so no idea what that actually looks like on the other side, but I guess I'll find out. Let's just get started, shall we? This probably won't go too long tonight. It's almost midnight where I am. I'm on the road, but I'm using, one of the sources I'm going to use a lot for this is Apple's newsletter. You might think, well, why? It came from a conversation I had in my personal life, just talking about that, and somebody was like, oh, this is kind of what I've started reading because, they just give it to you straight, right? They just give it to you straight, no bias, and of course, that's something I think we all search for. There is something to be said for a neutral, unobjective take for something. However, it's almost impossible to come by. I've talked about in the show how I'm always flattered when people say that they consider my content as not being biased, even though it is very biased. But what I do is I'm authentic about the bias that I present to stories, and so I want to try and bring that to the fore. And I think it's important. One thing I've noticed lately when it comes to this like space that I occupy in, and I think a lot of us occupy, where we're like, people who look at the news, and we're not progressives, we're not left wing by any stretch of the imagination. Of course, if you are somebody who's left wing and you're listening, welcome. Hopefully you learned something from this. But is that what's very interesting to me is how they're like, it's not just a function of the corporate press that echo chambers exist within an ecosystem. It's just the function of ecosystems. And so one of the reasons why I'm going to use places like Apple, and we might even look at CNN and other headlines to look at some of the stuff, is to remind ourselves what they're talking about, and also to analyze what they're saying in real time to understand the narrative that they're trying to play. So like, for example, here are the headlines from, it's Wednesday, May 15th. Here's what's in the news. This is on their X page. This is also what gets sent out to millions of people, I'm sure. Most people probably ignore the email from Apple, but like I said, I had one conversation in particular in my personal life where somebody was like, oh, this is where I've been turning for news. And not for nothing, I get the Plus subscription, so I get access to these as well. So, the first one, this is going to be an article we cover. Biden moves forward with a $1 billion weapons package for Israel, signaling his reluctance to deepen a rift with the U.S. ally over military operations in Rafah, a.k.a. bombing Palestinians out of existence. The second story, it says here, Trump's lawyer tries to discredit Michael Cohen, a key witness in the hush money trial, by suggesting Cohen was seeking revenge. Here's what to know about the cross-examination. I don't feel like talking about that, nor the next story, a broken marriage, a $20 million of the empire, and the killing of an art world kingpin. This whole format speaks to, I think, something that calls to people from a previous generation who didn't grow up with the internet, because it's like we got a couple big headlines, and then we kind of get into some fluff pieces. This was a headline that caught my eye, so this is going to be the second article we talk about, is COVID making a comeback? What to know about the latest highly transmissible subvariants? That's interesting. I hadn't heard anything about this recently, and I'm certainly not going to go out of my way to look for something that I don't think really affects me. But again, this got sent out to millions of people, or at the very least, tens of thousands. And then the final one, good for her, a Chicago teen who started college at the age of 10, just earned her doctoral degree. She's 17 years old. this might be a weird thing to say and a weird place to start this conversation, but I did read that last article. You know, it's about a Chicago teen, start college at 10. It's very interesting because I don't know how else to say this, but it doesn't look like she's 10 years old when she started college. She looks more like a teenager. She looks like somebody who's maybe 15 or 16 years old. So that's kind of a weird story. I'm not really going to go into depth about it, but it was just something weird that caught my eye. And if you're watching the video replay of this, I'll throw the pictures up on screen here so that you can see for yourself and decide. Anyway, let's talk about the two articles that I wanted to get to. Biden moves forward on $1 billion in new arms for Israel. This is by Nancy Youssef and Jared Malson. So it says the Biden administration notified Congress on Tuesday that it was moving forward with more than $1 billion in new weapons deals for Israel and the U.S. Was that what that says? For Israel, U.S. and congressional officials said a massive arms package less than a week after the White House paused a shipment of bombs over a planned Israeli assault on Rafah. Let's keep reading. The latest weapons package includes the potential transfer of $700 million in tank ammunition, $500 million in tactical vehicle. What would they need tanks for? What do they need tanks for exactly? Like, why do you need tank ammunition if you're going after a population that's pretty well subjugated? Can tanks even drive, or is this like MRAP tanks? Maybe it's MRAP tanks. $60 million in mortar rounds. Seems like they could just use bullets. There are still additional steps before the weapons would be approved and delivered. The decision to proceed with the approval process underscored the Biden administration's reluctance to deepen its rift with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over the Rafah operation by restricting longer-term weapons deals with its closest Middle East ally. U.S. officials have stressed their opposition to a full-scale Israeli attack in the city, saying it could result in widespread civilian casualties and deepen Gaza's humanitarian crisis without ending the threat Israel faces from Hamas, but they have registered their opposition so far only by withholding a single shipment of 2,000-pound bombs. President Biden said last week he would consider withholding additional weapons if Israel assaulted what he called population centers in Rafah. He added that he would continue to provide weapons that the country could use for self-defense, a policy echoed by his top advisors. Quote, "We are continuing to send military assistance," end quote. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan told reporters on Monday, "We have paused a shipment of 2,000-pound bombs because we don't believe they should be dropped in densely populated cities." So it's interesting how the framing of this article was that, we don't want to. On the one hand, it's saying that we don't want, or the government doesn't want to deepen the divide or deepen the rift between Netanyahu's regime and the Biden regime, as it were. But then, here's what you have to understand about every major story, and I talk about this a lot. Headlines are not written by the writers of the article. Right, headlines are almost always written by the editors. This is my understanding of how things work in corporate press outlets. And moreover, it would follow from that the little blurb that goes out on X or other social or in the email inboxes of people who receive a newsletter like this every single day, that's not something written by the people who write the article anyway. What that's all designed to do is to get you to click. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the incentive structure that exists. That's what you're taught from a young age as a writer, or as somebody who's, if you're not a fan of writing, not a fan of the medium, what you're told to do from a young age by your teacher in school is to write a catchy headline. Call your paper something interesting. In sales copy, it's all about getting people to read the next sentence. You're supposed to be building to something. And that's what these people get paid to do. They get paid to figure out ways to make people click on an article. So, Biden moved forward with a $1 billion weapon package for Israel, signaling his reluctance to deepen a rift. But then we get into the actual story here, right? We get into the actual story that has now disappeared off my screen. We get into the actual story, and what we learn is that there was very little that was actually held up. It was just some 2,000-pound bombs, because even the American government could admit that you shouldn't be dropping that on civilian populations. So everything else can go to them, including tank ammunition and mortar rounds and things that can cause massive carnage and destruction of a area that's already been destroyed. But hey, what are facts? And what are facts in the way of progress? Israel has carried out airstrikes and sent forces into Rafah over the past week in what it called a targeted operation to pressure Hamas into a deal that releases hostages in return for a temporary ceasefire. If memory serves, they were just negotiating again a couple weeks ago, and they both walked away from the table. Many of the more than 1 million Palestinians who were sheltering in the city have relocated in recent days. The State Department and White House National Security Council cited Sullivan's comments in response to questions about the new package. The Pentagon declined to comment. Seth Binder, an expert on U.S. weapons sales with the Middle East Democracy Center, a policy institute in Washington, said the White House decision to proceed with a large new weapons package for Israel only days after halting a pending shipment weakened its own attempt to pressure Netanyahu to rethink the conduct of the war. He says this is just another example of them muddying their message and undermining any real strength behind the hold. Even though it could take years for the weapons in the latest package to be delivered, why are we selling weapons years down the road? Isn't that interesting? Even though it could take years for the weapons in the latest package to be delivered, Binder said Israel could interpret the administration's proceeding with these deals as a sign that munitions expended in the war in Gaza would be restocked despite the sharp disagreement over Rafah. It's very weird when you read stories like this with the right lens, because you start to gain, you hopefully gain a better appreciation for just how deep the tendrils go when it comes to, what we might call the military-industrial complex, and more importantly, the role that the Israeli government plays in crafting U.S. foreign policy. So just in the matter of reading this article, what we've learned is that very little aid was ever actually blocked. It was just one thing out of 20 that we were sending them. And moreover, this isn't something that they even need right now. It talks about depleted stockpiles. Well, that implies that you've been saving up ammunition for quite a long time. Now, we could walk through the various regular, normal things. We were like, why do they need $1 billion? Why are we supposed to be the ones that send it to them? All these different things that we talk about and are worth discussing for sure. However, isn't it interesting when we really step back and we really look at something like this, how they just lay it all out so nicely for us. We just have to have the right lens to read it. So they go on to talk about the different tank rounds, rare instance of weapons deals, and, just finishing this, it says the U.S. weapons transfers to Israel are usually paid out for foreign aid funds provided by Congress. An aid package approved last month includes about $26 billion. So what's $1 billion more, including $5.2 billion in spending on air defense, $1 billion for the production of artillery, and billions of dollars for other weapon systems and U.S. military operations undertaken in the region in response to recent attacks. It also includes $9 billion for humanitarian assistance. The Hamas-led assault on southern Israel on October 7th left about 1,200 people dead. More than 35,000 people have been killed in Gaza since the start of the war. Most of them civilians, Palestinians, officials say, not specifying how many were combatants. Kind of interesting, though, because, there's this dual game that gets played in something like this. One is the actual, one is just the general machinations of government and the passing of money that feeds the companies that get to make the things and sell the things for a profit. That's one element. And then the other element is the geopolitical element. The other element is also the propaganda element, the PR element, how crafting of a narrative and trying to maintain some semblance of control. What I find interesting about this article in particular is that if we just passed a bill for $26 billion, what does $1 billion actually give us, or give the Israelis, for the case may be? And in fact, maybe it's this continued desire of the Biden administration to try and play the middle. He has a base that is seriously against the engagement in Palestine, seriously against the occupation of Gaza by the Israeli government, as evidenced by the countless encampments that can be seen across college campuses and the various demonstrations that have been done across the country in protest of the current engagement. One that I don't support, for the record, even if I don't really like either side in the conflict entirely, like at all, actually. But it's kind of interesting how even with that, so there is this negative attention the Biden administration is receiving. However, all the right people with all the right amounts of money still want him to do this. So like, could this just be a signal of, hey, I'm going to keep playing ball? It's interesting. Let's move on to our next story. I'll get a better sound effect for future episodes. The other story, this caught my eye just because it's been so far out of the news, right? Like, we're in 2024. It seems almost a lifetime ago when everything was crazy and locked down. And I think, at this time during the height of 2020, I wasn't on the road yet. I didn't get back on the road. No, this would have been the month that I got back on the road in my own, in my own travels and for work. So this was actually when I started traveling again, and I can remember how freaking awful it was back then. And everybody was so scared of something that we never really needed to be scared about, did we? So it says, this is from the LA Times, there's a new, highly transmissible COVID-19 variant. Could FLiRT lead to a summer uptick? Yeah, that's right. They decided to call this thing FLiRT. Why? We're going to get into that in the article. So this is by Rongong Lin II. Rongong. That's funny. 2 new COVID-19 subvariants, collectively nicknamed FLiRT, are increasingly edging out the winter's dominant strain ahead of a possible summer uptick in coronavirus infections. Very interesting, just in the outset here again, how while all these people are biased, all these people live in a certain la-la land of their own making, they're still inside of the narrative. Again, so how was this article started? How was this article, let me get back to there. Yeesh. A little bit more difficult on the iPad versus, here it is. This one was said, is COVID making a comeback? What to know about the latest highly transmissible subvariant? So I would venture to guess, given what we know about coronaviruses and what we learned over the past few years about coronaviruses, is that there are always subvariants. And in fact, if we take something like the flu, we know that every single year they basically have to guess which of the variants they're going to be. And those are the ones that they make the flu shot for. And if they get it wrong, well, people still get sick. But hey, at least the pharmaceutical companies get their money. So this is saying 2 new COVID-19 subvariants, collectively nicknamed FLiRT, are increasingly edging out the winter's dominant strain, up ahead of a possible summer uptick in coronavirus infections. The new FLiRT subvariants, officially known as KP.2 and KP.1.1, are believed to be roughly 20% more transmissible than their parent JN1, the winter's dominant subvariant. So what we're really just doing is tracking the virus over time. Much like your phone runs iOS or Android, 17.1 and 17.2 are both iOS 17. It's just minor variations between that. So that's all they're doing here. But of course, what they're trying to do is they're trying to instill fear for the people who still hold on that this is the most dangerous virus ever to be faced, that man has ever faced. They're 20% more transmissible, but how transmissible are we since the beginning? Probably a lot more, I would venture to guess. They combined 35% of coronavirus infections nationally for the 2-week period that began April 28th, according to the U.S. Center for Disease Control. By contrast, JN.1 is now believed to comprise 16% of infections in midwinter. It was blamed for more than 80. It's been quite a while since we've had a new dominant variant in the U.S., said Dr. David Braunstein, an infectious disease specialist at Kaiser Permanente in Southern California. With each of these variants that takes over from the one before it, we do see increased transmissibility. It's easier to spread from person to person, so that's really the concern with FLiRT. The largest FLiRT subvariant, KP.2, is growing particularly fast as a proportion of coronavirus infections. Again, nothing here about overall infections, nothing here about the risk people face. They're gonna talk about people who are at risk, but nothing about lethality, nothing about and symptoms. It's just it's transmissible. The largest FLiRT subvariant KP2 is growing particularly fast. The new subvariants have been dubbed FLiRT for the mutation on the evolved COVID-19 virus. So instead of an L, there's an F, and instead of a T, there's an R, and then they put an I in it to make it cute, Chin Hong said. So the reason why we're calling it FLiRT is because, I don't know, scientists are playing weird games with us. It's like, I get it. You try to come up with something catchy, but like, it's almost comical. It's an interesting to reflect. It's almost comical how like this thing that was supposed to kill humanity 4 years ago is now at a point where we can call it something cute because we feel like it. Despite their increased transmissibility, so this is buried down the page. So it's not important. It's important for us to tell you how transmissible this is. It's important for us to tell you there's a new subvariant of a thing that was already going on beforehand. But what's not important, what's going to be buried almost at the end of the article, is that despite their increased transmissibility, the new mutations don't appear to result in more severe disease, and the vaccine is expected to continue working well, given the new subvariants are only slightly different from the winter ones. The entry of subvariants also come as COVID-19 hospitalizations hit record lows. For the weekend ending April 27th, there was 5,000 admissions, 5,098, 1/7 of this winter's peak, in which 35,137 admissions were reported for the week that ended January 6th. Funny, I got sick right around then. However, as of May 1st, hospitals nationwide are no longer required to report COVID-19 admissions to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So as of May 1st, so up until now, they've still been reporting this stuff, and now they don't have to anymore. Well, I guess that's a good thing. In Los Angeles County, COVID-19 levels appear to be in a lull for the week that ended April 27th. Coronavirus levels in LA County wastewater were at 8% of the winter peak. Still, some doctors say they wouldn't be surprised if there's a summer uptick in COVID cases, as has occurred in prior seasons. By the summer, we can expect people's immunity to be a little bit lower. I don't know how that makes sense exactly. For those who are older or immunocompromised, they are potentially at risk for getting more serious disease. Plus, people often gather indoors during this time frame. According to Ching Hong, he said he's seeing COVID-19 patients at UC San Francisco with serious illnesses. They were either very old or very immune compromised. So I guess the big thing to take away from this, there's a lot more of this article if we wanted to read it, is not much has changed. It's still just something trying to gin up controversy, trying to gin up fear in the minds of people that are still captured by the corporate press. Well, I hope you guys liked today's article. We'll be back again tomorrow. If you're catching the recording, this will probably be a unique bumper, but just in case I get lazy, if you're catching the recording, do me a favor, pop into one of these spaces live. Let me know. It'll be, I'm thinking like 9, 10 o'clock Central Time, depending as my schedule allows. But I'm thinking about doing these daily, little quick bites, give you guys a little bit of news, talk about things. I'll probably have other topics that I want to bring up. And who knows, maybe even bring some friends along for the ride. So do me a favor, if this is your first time listening, make sure you follow me on X at the LB Muniz. I'm posting all the articles there. I'd really like to get it to where you could just support me directly on X. You can give me a tip. But if you want to support the project, go to beenawake.com, subscribe with your email, sign up to be a premium member. It costs you $50 a year. If you think about it, it's a really good deal. You can also go over to Patreon and Locals. I have paywalls there as well.
If you like what you heard today, go to beenawake.com to subscribe for future updates. My name is LB Muniz, and I am not one with the woke.
corporate press outlets, and moreover, it would